Emily Carter had lived in her small Washington state home for almost 5 years, a place where the walls held warm memories but lately felt colder than the early autumn air drifting in from the bay. She tried not to notice the shift. She tried not to name the distance. But it was there, quiet, steady, stretching itself between her and her husband Mark like a thin sheet of glass she couldn't break through. She kept telling herself that every couple went through phases, that stress from work could dim the brightest person, that maybe he just needed time to breathe. But even as she repeated these comforting thoughts, the strange heaviness in the house grew stronger every day. Her mornings always began the same way now. She would wake to the sound of Mark's footsteps already fading down the hallway, the scent of coffee freshly brewed but untouched by him, and the low murmur of the news station he used as background noise more than anything else. Before she could even slip out of bed, he would already be grabbing his jacket, mumbling something about leaving early, deadlines, meetings, things he never used to mention. Emily would watch him from the kitchen doorway, searching his face for something familiar, something warm, something that felt like the man she fell in love with 4 years ago. But he rarely met her eyes anymore. When he did, it was only for a second, and the look he gave her was always soft, tired, almost apologetic. But for what, she didn't know. In the evenings, the silence hit even harder. Mark would come home late, always with an explanation ready on his lips before she could even ask. A late conference call, a coworker who needed help, a traffic jam on the highway. Sometimes the excuses sounded real. Sometimes they sounded rehearsed. Emily tried not to question him. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe this lull was temporary. But the feeling that something was slipping away from them never left her. It clung to her like the mist that rolled in from the Puget Sound. That afternoon, one of those gray afternoons where the sky looked like wet cotton, Emily tried to keep herself busy. She folded laundry, organizing Mark's shirts the way he liked, smoothing out the sleeves like she always did. She planned to make his favorite dinner later, hoping to lighten the heaviness between them, even if just a little. She hummed under her breath, trying to distract herself from the ache building in her chest. The sound of the dryer filled the house with a warm, steady hum. It was comforting, familiar, predictable, unlike everything else lately. Then the front door swung open. It wasn't a knock. It wasn't a gentle hello. It wasn't even a hesitant pause. It was fast, sudden, urgent. Emily froze, her hand still gripping a cotton shirt. For half a second she thought it might be Mark coming home early, maybe ready to talk, maybe ready to explain whatever had been weighing on him. Her heartbeat quickened with a sliver of hope. But it wasn't him. It was Jason, her stepson. He stood in the doorway with the cold air bursting in behind him, his chest rising and falling like he had just run all the way from the street. Jason was 24, tall, dark-haired like his father, usually composed, even distant. He wasn't the type to rush. He wasn't the type to burst into a house unannounced. He wasn't the type to look shaken. But today all that calm control was gone. Jason. Emily stepped forward, her voice small but steady. What happened? Are you okay? He didn't answer right away. He shut the door behind him, pressed his back to it, and dragged a hand through his hair. His eyes were sharp, too sharp for someone who normally avoided emotional conversations. Something was wrong. Something was deeply wrong. Emily put down the folded laundry and moved closer, her heart pounding in her ears. She had always gotten along with Jason, even though their relationship was built more from politeness than closeness. He had been an adult when she married his father, so Emily never wanted to overstep or impose. They respected each other. They understood each other. But they were never emotionally intertwined. Until now. Jason finally looked up at her, and she saw something she had never seen in his eyes before. Fear mixed with guilt, mixed with something he couldn't hide even if he tried. Emily, he said, and his voice cracked. I need to tell you something. Her stomach tightened. She tried to keep her voice calm. Okay, about what? Jason glanced toward the hallway where Mark always hung his coat, and in that single glance Emily felt the air shift. She felt her breath lock in her throat. She knew whatever this was, whatever was about to come out of Jason's mouth, it had to do with Mark. She felt it in her bones. Jason moved forward, stopping only a few feet from her. I didn't come here to hurt you, he said quickly. almost stumbling over his words. I didn't. You have to believe that. Emily nodded slowly, though her heartbeat was climbing so fast it felt like it might break through her ribs. I do believe you, she whispered. Just tell me what's going on. Jason exhaled hard. A long, shaky breath that seemed like it had been trapped inside him for far too long. It's about Dad, he said. Emily felt the world around her stop. The laundry room faded from her awareness. The soft hum of the dryer felt a mile away. Everything narrowed into that one sentence. What about him? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady though her throat felt tight. Jason hesitated. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he was deciding if he should say it. That terrified her more than anything. He ran a hand over his face and took another breath. Look, I didn't want to get in the middle of your marriage, he said, his voice trembling slightly. But I can't stay quiet anymore. Not after what I found out. Emily's fingers curled around the edge of the counter. Found out? She asked quietly. Found out what? Jason swallowed hard. Dad hasn't been honest with you. Not for a long time. Her chest tightened like something sharp had just pressed against it. She felt a flicker of heat behind her eyes but forced herself to stay still, to stay calm, to listen. Emily had known something was off. She had felt the distance, felt the coldness, felt the lies hiding in the quiet moments. But hearing someone say it out loud, especially Jason, made it real in a way she wasn't prepared for. Jason stepped closer. His voice lowered. He's been going somewhere, he said, late at night. Almost every night. Emily's breath shook. Where? Jason looked at her with eyes full of conflict. With someone. The words hit her like a sudden drop, like the ground had disappeared from beneath her feet. She gripped the counter even tighter, trying not to lose her balance. But before she could ask another question, before she could even form a thought, Jason continued. It's not what you think, he said quickly. But it's also worse in a different way. Emily's head spun. Jason, please, just tell me the truth. He looked at her with a softness she didn't expect. A softness that felt like he was trying to protect her from the impact of his own words. He didn't want you to know, Jason whispered. Because he thinks the truth will break you. The room fell silent. Heavy. Electric. Fragile. Emily felt like her entire body had turned to glass. She took a shaky step back. Jason, she said, her voice barely a breath. What exactly has he been hiding from me? Jason's jaw tightened. His eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the weight of someone carrying a truth too heavy for one person. He opened his mouth. He hesitated again. Then, with a quiet tremble in his voice, he finally said, Emily, Dad's been hiding this from you for years. And before she could say another word, before she could ask the question forming on her lips, Jason told her the first piece of the secret that would change everything. Jason's words hung in the air like a storm cloud that refused to break, thick and heavy and full of electricity. Emily felt the room tilt slightly, as if the floor beneath her had shifted without warning. Her pulse hammered in her throat, and for a moment she couldn't move. She couldn't speak. She couldn't even breathe. She had known something was wrong with Mark for months, maybe longer. But hearing Jason say it so directly made her stomach twist in a way she wasn't ready for. Jason, she whispered, her voice thin and shaky. Tell me what he's been hiding. Jason looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers like he was trying to release tension that had been trapped there for years. He walked to the edge of the living room, then back again, pacing like someone caught between loyalty and guilt. Emily waited, her body stiff, her eyes on him, afraid of the next sentence he would speak. Finally, he stopped pacing and met her eyes. I didn't want to get involved, he said softly. But Dad, he's been struggling with things he doesn't talk about, things he doesn't want anyone to see. Emily swallowed hard. Struggling how? Jason hesitated. Emotionally, he said. And for a long time he's tried to deal with it alone. The words hit Emily harder than she expected. She had seen the sadness in Mark's eyes, the tired way he moved, the moments when he zoned out like he wasn't completely in the room. She always assumed it was work stress or exhaustion or something temporary. She had never imagined something deeper, something older, something painful enough for him to hide. Jason continued, talking faster now. as if the dam inside him had cracked open. He never told you about the stuff from before, about what he went through after the divorce, about how he never really healed from everything he lost. He didn't want you to see that side of him. Emily shook her head slowly. But why keep that from me? She asked quietly. Why lie about where he's been going? Jason took a deep breath. Because he wasn't ready to tell you what he was dealing with, he said. And the only way he knew how to handle it was by pretending it didn't exist. Hiding it. Avoiding it. Covering it with work and long hours and late nights. But where was he actually going? Emily pressed, her voice trembling. Jason hesitated again. The silence stretched. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully, weighing each one before letting it go. He's been going to support meetings, Jason finally said. Every night. He didn't tell you because he didn't want you to worry. He didn't want you to look at him differently. Emily blinked. Support meetings? For what? Why? How long? 100 questions hit her at once. Jason continued quickly, seeing the confusion on her face. Dad never learned how to talk about emotions. Not really. Not even with me. After the divorce, he shut down. He kept everything inside. He blamed himself for things that weren't his fault. He never talked to anyone about it. Then he met you and he thought he could just move forward. Leave the pain behind. But things don't work like that. You can't bury something that deep forever. Emily felt her breath catch. Not from shock but from a slow, painful ache growing in her chest. She pictured Mark struggling alone, hiding his emotions like they were something shameful. It broke her heart to imagine him carrying a burden he never talked about, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Why didn't he tell me? She whispered. It wasn't anger in her voice. Just hurt. Soft, quiet hurt. Jason stepped closer, his voice gentler now. Because he's terrified, he said. Dad thinks that if you knew how bad things really were, you'd think he was weak. Or broken. Or not the man you thought he was. Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed, even though Jason wasn't judging her. She took a slow breath. I would never think that, she whispered. I just wanted him to talk to me. Jason nodded. I know. But Dad's pride gets in the way. He wants to be strong for you. Always. So when things got worse, instead of opening up, he hid it. He made excuses. He pushed you away because he didn't want you to see him falling apart. Emily pressed her hand to her chest as if trying to steady herself. How long has he been going to these meetings? She asked. Jason hesitated again. About a year, he said. But the last few months have been the hardest. That's why he's been disappearing at night. He didn't want you to know the truth until he felt stable enough to explain everything. He told me he would tell you soon. He just didn't know how. Emily felt her lips part in surprise. He told you. Jason nodded. He finally talked to me last week. It was the first time he opened up in years. He said he was scared. Really scared. He said he didn't want to lose you. The air in the room felt heavy, pressing down on her shoulders. Emily suddenly understood the tiredness in Mark's voice, the distant look in his eyes, the gentle ways he tried to hide his sadness. He wasn't pulling away from her because he didn't love her. He was pulling away because he was afraid loving her made him vulnerable. Jason rubbed the back of his neck, looking conflicted. I shouldn't be telling you this, he said quietly. It's his story to tell. But after seeing him last night, I couldn't stay silent. He looked like he was drowning. He's carrying so much, and he's terrified it'll spill into your life and hurt you. Emily closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the tightness building in her chest. She felt a mix of heartbreak and relief, heartbreak because Mark hadn't trusted her enough to open up. Relief because the distance didn't come from betrayal or lack of love. Came from pain. A deep unspoken pain. Jason continued softly. The person he's been meeting, it's not another woman. It's a counselor who runs the support group. Dad didn't want you to think he couldn't handle his own life. But the truth is he needed help. And he didn't know how to tell you without feeling like he failed you. Emily's eyes softened. How could he ever think that? Jason shrugged helplessly. He thinks he has to protect everyone. Even from himself. The words pierced through her. They sounded exactly like Mark. Strong, proud, quiet. The kind of man who carried the world on his shoulders because he didn't want anyone else to feel the weight. Emily stepped back and sank onto the edge of the couch, her hands trembling slightly. Jason watched her with concern but didn't move closer. "Emily," he said gently, "I know this is a lot, but there's something else you need to know." She lifted her eyes to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What now?" Jason's expression shifted. More serious, more emotional. "Dad asked me to tell you," he said. "When the time felt right. When I thought you needed to know. He didn't want to hide forever. He just didn't know how to start the conversation." Emily's breath caught. "He asked you to tell me?" Jason nodded. "Yeah. He said you deserved the truth. He said you deserved someone who wasn't scared to talk to you. He said he wasn't ready yet, but he wanted you to know eventually." Emily pressed a hand over her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. Not tears of betrayal. Not tears of anger. Tears of love. Tears of fear. Tears of understanding. Jason's voice softened even more. "He loves you, Emily. More than you know. That's why he's terrified." Emily felt something inside her loosen. A knot she had been carrying for months. She wasn't angry anymore. Just heartbroken that the man she loved had been hurting so deeply behind closed doors. Jason took a slow breath, then whispered the final truth, the one that would stay with her long after the conversation ended. "He thought the truth would break you," he said quietly. "But he doesn't realize the truth is the only thing that can save him." Emily looked toward the front door, imagining Mark walking through it, tired and worn and full of secrets. And for the first time in a long time she didn't feel fear. She felt ready. Ready to face the truth. Ready to hear everything. Ready to love him through the darkness he thought he had to face alone. The silence in the living room felt like a weight pressing on Emily's chest after Jason finished speaking. Everything she thought she understood about her marriage had shifted in a matter of minutes. She sat still on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor, feeling her heartbeat pulse through her fingertips. She didn't feel anger, not the sharp kind that burned hot and loud. What she felt was deeper. Something slow, heavy, and full of ache. A kind of heartbreak that came from loving someone who didn't know how to let her in. Jason watched her carefully, unsure if he should stay or leave, his hands deep in his pockets like he was afraid to move. Emily finally looked up at him, her voice soft and unsteady. "Does he know you came here today?" Jason shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "He'd probably be upset. But I couldn't watch him fall apart anymore. And I couldn't watch you sit here in the dark wondering what you did wrong." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered to herself more than to him. "I just didn't know." Jason nodded gently, his voice low. "You couldn't have known. He's good at hiding things when he's hurting. He always has been." The house felt different now. As if someone had opened all the windows and let in a cold wind she wasn't prepared for. The truth Jason revealed didn't solve everything. Not even close, but it gave shape to the shadow she had been living under. And even though it hurt, it also felt like the first real piece of clarity she had received in months. Emily took a deep breath and stood up. "Where are these meetings he goes to?" she asked. Jason hesitated. "I don't think he wants you to go there." "I'm not asking if he wants me to," she said steadily. "I'm asking where they are." Jason rubbed his jaw, thinking. A community center outside town. Near the old ferry dock. Tuesday and Thursday nights. Sometimes Saturdays when he's having a harder week. Emily's stomach twisted. "He's there tonight?" Jason nodded slowly. "He should be." For a moment Emily stood frozen, unsure of her next move. Then she grabbed her coat from the hook near the door. Jason's eyes widened as he realized what she intended to do. "Emily," he said quickly, stepping toward her. "Talk to him at home. Don't go there. He might feel cornered." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "I'm not going there to confront him," she said softly. "I'm going because he shouldn't be alone. Not tonight." Jason stared at her for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. "Okay," he said. "Then I'll drive you." The drive across town felt longer than usual. The sky had shifted from gray to deep blue, carrying the cold of an early Washington night. Streetlights flickered on, casting long pools of pale light across the road as Jason kept his eyes focused ahead. Emily sat quietly beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wasn't preparing a speech. She wasn't imagining a dramatic scene. She just wanted to see Mark, to understand him, to know the truth from his own mouth. When they reached the community center, Emily stared at the building for a moment. It was small, older, with a few cars parked outside and lights spilling through the windows. She could almost picture Mark inside, quiet, withdrawn, sitting with strangers who knew parts of him she had never been allowed to see. Jason placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Take your time," he said. "And remember, he's scared. He's not hiding to hurt you. He's hiding because he's hurting." Emily nodded, took a slow breath and stepped out of the car. Inside, the room was warm and bright. A group of people sat in a circle of chairs, each speaking softly while others listened. The hum of quiet voices felt strangely comforting. Emily scanned the room until her eyes landed on Mark. He sat with his elbows resting on his knees, fingers intertwined, his posture tired. His face looked older than she remembered. More worn, more fragile, like he had been carrying something much heavier than he could hold. He didn't see her at first. He was listening to the person speaking across from him, his expression full of empathy and exhaustion. Seeing him like that made Emily's throat tighten. She had never seen that version of him. Not the man trying to be strong. Not the man holding everything together. But the man unraveling. The man quietly fighting things he didn't know how to name. When the meeting ended, people began to gather their things, offering soft words to each other before heading out. Mark stood slowly, rubbing the back of his neck, preparing to leave. Then he turned and froze. He saw her. She stood near the entrance, her coat wrapped around her, her eyes soft and full of emotion she couldn't hide if she tried. "Emily," he breathed, shock flickering across his face. "What are you doing here?" She stepped forward slowly. "I needed to see you." Mark's eyes dropped to the floor, his shoulders tense. "Did Jason?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said gently. "He told me everything." Mark closed his eyes, exhaling a long breath. The kind that comes when someone finally realizes the truth they were hiding has reached the surface. "I didn't want you to find out this way," he whispered. Emily moved closer. "Then how did you want me to find out?" Mark didn't answer right away. His voice shook when he finally spoke. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I just wasn't ready. I didn't want you to see me like this." "Like what?" "Broken," he whispered. Emily reached out and touched his arm, gentle but steady. "You're not broken," she said softly. "You're hurting. That's different." Mark swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "I didn't want you to think less of me. I've been trying so hard to be strong, to be the man you married, to give you a good life. You don't have to be perfect for me," Emily said, her voice trembling. "You just have to let me in." Mark shook his head slowly. "I didn't want to drag you into this. The meetings, the memories, the darkness. I wanted to protect you from it." "You can't protect me by shutting me out," she whispered. "You were slipping away, Mark. I felt it every day. And I thought I was losing you for reasons I couldn't understand." Mark lowered his head, guilt tightening his jaw. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never wanted to hurt you." Emily stepped closer until their foreheads nearly touched. "Then don't do it alone anymore," she whispered. "Don't hide from me. Talk to me. Let me stand with you instead of watching you walk away." Mark's breath caught. For the first time in months, he let the walls around him fall. He looked at her with a vulnerability that reached deep into the quietest part of her heart. "I'm scared," he admitted. "I'm scared of failing you. I'm scared of being enough." "You don't have to be enough," she whispered. "You just have to be honest." Mark let out a shaky breath. He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling as they intertwined with hers. Emily squeezed gently, grounding him. "I didn't want you to see how weak I am," he said. "You're not weak," she whispered. "You're human." They stood there in the empty room, the lights dimming as the last few people left. Emily rested her head on his chest, listening to the uneven rhythm of his heartbeat. It wasn't the beat of a man who didn't love her. It was the beat of a man who loved her so much he had feared she would run if she saw the shadows inside him. After a long moment, Mark spoke again, his voice quiet. "Do you really want to do this with me? All of it?" Emily lifted her eyes. Yes, she said simply. If you let me. Slowly he nodded, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. Then I'll tell you everything, he whispered. No more hiding. Emily smiled softly, tears warm on her cheeks. Good, she said. Because I'm not going anywhere. Together they walked out of the community center and into the cool night air, hand in hand. The road ahead wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was finally honest, finally open, and for the first time in months, Emily felt like their home might find warmth again. And Mark, for the first time in years, didn't feel alone.